So before I get into my review, I need to preface this first. This review, at least in particular this one, is going to have spoilers for the story and the game because there are positive and negatives from this game that are spoilers. So anyway, this is the review for Yakuza 4. Yakuza 4 is and was the start of the heavy-handed, mature, independent, individual storytelling where it transitions from character to character, not just you playing as Kazuma Kiryu anymore. In Yakuza 4, you play as Kazuma Kiryu, Taiga Sayajima, Shun Akiyama, and I honestly, I forget the detective's name. He's honestly the weakest character. I didn't really care much about his story. So I'll get the good stuff out of the way first. Compared to Yakuza 3's remastered, Yakuza 4 remastered looks amazing. Okay, it's definitely still PS3 era, but it looks a lot better than Yakuza 3's remaster. Yakuza 3 was just so bland and so just meaty looking. Yakuza 4, the character models actually look really good. They're not anywhere near as magnificent looking as Yakuza 0, especially with its cutscenes, but Yakuza 4 is definitely a solid remastered in the visual fidelity department. The audio, it's a Yakuza Japanese game through and through from Sega. It's Japanese voiceover, and as far as I saw, there isn't any options to set it to English, French, Spanish, anything. Now, they do give you subtitles just like any other Yakuza game, and that's good. But just like any other Yakuza game, going into it, you need to understand this is a Japanese game through and through. It's going to be Japanese voiceover and whichever language subtitles that you want to read. As far as the story is actually really strong. Compared to Yakuza 3, the story is great. On its own, it is really good. The story centers around one main mystery set back from the 80s of basically a clan massacre set up and orchestrated by one guy, that being Taiga Sayajima. And he basically was supposed to orchestrate the massacre with Goro Majima. I know, my favorite character. Well, it ends up just being Sayajima, and I won't get that spoilery. I'll just leave it at that. But basically, that story revolves around 4 to 8 different characters, and you play as 4 of them. And every single story links in a particular part of said main story and the mystery. And by the finale, which the finale is called Requiem, by the finale, it does actually all kind of just link into each gear, and you do actually get a grasp on what the hell is going on. As far as the finale, I think it was a little bit of a letdown because I don't know what exactly they thought they were going for, but it kind of seemed like they were trying to transition and do multiple things at the same time. Like, one part of it, the storytelling and the cutscenes, it was kind of like they were trying to edge more towards being political again, like Yakuza 3, but then right after that, it would just kind of narrow down, and it'd just be, go kick their ass, and we'll do that. But throughout the story, though, I can honestly say the biggest and best thing about Yakuza 4 is how heavy-handed and how particulate they were towards the story. Okay, it still has outside events and sub-stories and everything, but the main culprit, the main thing for Yakuza 4 is the story, hands down. Okay, and yeah, honestly, you actually love these endearing characters. Like I said, the detective, he's the weakest, but I mean, I still cared about his story, but his story to me kind of ended halfway through his act, but that's besides the point. If I were to pick a favorite of the main characters, not just Goro Majima, I would probably have to go with Taiga Sayajima. His story and the revelations he comes across, magnificent. Magnificent revenge tale. And Akiyama's story of him being basically a loan shark and everything, but he's kind of a good guy loan shark. His story was pretty cool, and his character was nifty. I'll just say that. Kiryu is always awesome. That's all I can say. Kiryu's just awesome. I mean, personally, I don't think they really needed Kiryu in this story in particular, but because it's Yakuza, Kiryu basically had to be ham-fisted into it. Still have the characters from the Okinawa clans, his orphans, Haruko, and thank God, the majority of the game and story stays as far away from his kids as they possibly can. I don't have anything against the characters or the kids themselves. It's just, in Yakuza 3, it was literally the first 5 or 6 hours, you were basically getting to know these kids, and they were dull. I didn't like any of the character development. I didn't like their stories. It was all just too adolescent for a Yakuza game. Luckily, Yakuza 4 has the kids brought back in it still, but they focus more on the adults and the mature story and the heavy-handed storytelling. And just because of that, the narrative as a whole is simply excellent. Now, one of the biggest letdowns and a negative for Yakuza 4, continuity errors, and that is stemming from the past of the story. So, if you're doing what I'm doing, going from Yakuza 0 to 6, you'll realize one thing in Yakuza 4 about 3/4 of the way through. The story doesn't really add up continuously. So in Yakuza 0, it showed Goro Majima with long hair, and, it showed parts of why he lost his eye and everything. Well, in Yakuza 4, it expands on that, which is great. I'm glad that you have the full story of what happened with his eye. The problem is, in Yakuza 0, he had long hair when he was getting tortured. And Yakuza 4, he had his normal short hair from the mainline games. It's kind of a small and minor nitpick, yes, but it's a continuity error nonetheless. Not to mention, in Yakuza 0, it said that he betrayed his boss, but Yakuza 4, first of all, was a whole different boss, and he was never tortured in Yakuza 4. He fought a bunch of his own clan's goons, and he was chained up, yes, but he wasn't exactly tortured. He just kind of was chained up, refused to apologize, and then had his eye taken. Yakuza 0, it showed they ambushed him, tortured him, and then took his eye, just because he betrayed them, which in Yakuza 4, like I said, he didn't exactly betray anybody. He was told not to go, and he was refusing the order, yes, but he wasn't exactly betraying anybody. He didn't do anything to betray anybody. He was forced to fight people before he could actually betray anybody. So, anyway, I won't linger on that any longer. That's the biggest negative. And honestly, Yakuza 4 doesn't have all that many negatives. The visuals are actually really good, especially with it being a PS4 remaster. The audio is Yakuza audio. The story is extremely strong and very well crafted. I still think Yakuza 0's storytelling was better, just because Yakuza 0 had the actual interwoven stories that ended up connecting, very narrowly. Yakuza 4, it's just Act 1, this character, you play through their story. Act 2, this character, and so on. So I think they should have, at least for the remaster, rework the storytelling, make it more like Yakuza 0, where it's, two chapters, it being Taiga, 2 chapters Kiryu, 2 chapters the detective, 2 chapters Akiyama. I think that would have been great, a great story flow. Because honestly, at the beginning of every chapter after, I'd say the second act, it's always a different part of the story, so it's not necessarily used already, but it just feels like a rehash every single time, like a refresher. When you restart, when you start a new act, it just kind of feels like you're placed back at the beginning. It's still a different part of the story, but that's just how I felt. But as a whole, Yakuza 4 is an excellent game. It's definitely one of the strongest of the Yakuza games in the series. I'm going to have to say Yakuza 4 is a 7.5 out of 10, and that's the same score I gave the first Yakuza Kiwami 1. With that being said, just because I'm giving these games scores at 8 or under doesn't mean that they're bad games. This is actually one of my favorite game series. And, you know, my two all-time favorite game series now, Metal Gear Solid and The Last of Us. I say now because The Last of Us is now being a full-fledged series with, you know, part 2 coming out. But Yakuza is definitely in one of my top 5 for the list for favorite game series. But it has more flaws in the games than the likes of Metal Gear Solid. So while I love these games, I can't be a fanboy and say they're the greatest thing ever, because they're not. They have definite flaws and a lot more than Metal Gear Solid and The Last of Us. But anyway, Yakuza 4 is a strong game, strong story, and it's a 7.5 out of 10. Thank you.